Welcome to this AI Group webinar. Today we're going to be talking about how to manage worker visa and travel exemption processes and the complications and frustrations that have come on the scene since COVID-19. Our guest presenters today are from the specialist migration agency Visa Solutions, who are also an AI Group member and who have been helping a lot of our members with some of these issues. And we have the Managing Director, Dan Engels. Welcome, Dan.
Morning, Tony.
And Migration Agent, Keeney Lee from Visa Solutions. And I'm Tony Melville, Head of Corporate Affairs at AI Group. As always, we need your questions as we're going through today and any comments you might have in the chat box on your screen. Add your full name if you wish, and then if we don't get to your question during the presentation, we have the option of getting back to you potentially afterwards. We'll be online for around about an hour. We won't be going over an hour, but we may go under. And we hope you can stay with us, but if not, a video of this will be presented and distributed to participants within the next 2 business days. If you need technical support, scroll down to our troubleshooting guide and you can get some help there. But first of all, and we'll make this a real conversation today, we'll go to Dan, and Dan will cover some of the major issues, and we'll be asking questions throughout. So as I say, toss some questions and I'll keep an eye out for them and put them to Dan.
Okay.
Over to you, Dan.
All right, thank you, Tony. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Well, lots happened in the last 12 months, and so we're just going to cover off the main issues that we see from an immigration point of view. Obviously, immigration and employment law are closely linked, and if we come across any of those employment law issues, everyone should call the workplace advice line.
Yep.
Okay. So this morning, what we're going to cover is the changes that we've seen on the immigration front since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. Interestingly enough, March 25th, 2020, was when Australia locked down the borders. So it's almost just about bang on 12 months. Overview of the main visas that AI Group members have come across. We field a lot of those queries for the workplace advice line. And so there's some visas that AI Group members regularly ask us about, so we'll cover those. A regular question that comes up with members is the work rights for employees. This is a particular issue in the last 12 months where you've got people who have had to extend their stay on shore. They've gone for various different types of visas. Maybe they've changed visas. Maybe their visa has run out. And it's important that employers always check, and probably more regularly check, the work rights of their employees. International border closures and the quarantine arrangements. That's probably a new element for many employers, so we're just going to touch on that briefly. And then the last part, which my colleague Keeney will be covering, will be the travel exemptions to enter Australia or travel overseas. Even this morning, we've seen that the pathway to New Zealand has become open, so that's a recent announcement. But this is going to be it's a constantly changing area, so employers need to be checking that if they've got people coming or going. So that's, in a nutshell, what we're going to cover. And we'll just jump straight into the overview. And this is a timeline of what's occurred. I really just wanted to cover this briefly. We've all been through this, and so it's worthwhile just casting our minds back to it. I think when COVID-19 hit Australia back in March 2020, the initial view was perhaps that this would take about 3 months and then Australia would get through it. And it's obviously impacted on the Australian economy for a much longer period than what we were expecting. And the Australian borders were closed on the 25th of March 2020. And then shortly after that, each of the states went through a nationwide series of lockdowns, which was different for each state. Federal government introduced the National Cabinet concept, and each of the premiers were given the authority to manage their own quarantining arrangements. In response, the Department of Home Affairs announced a number of changes at the beginning of April. There was concessions for visa holders. There were several 100,000 visa holders who were holding temporary visas in Australia. They were caught out by the pandemic. Some were unable to return home, and some were required to provide critical skills, essential services in Australia. So the department responded accordingly. That was at the beginning of April. And then there was an announcement about a subclass 408 COVID-19 visa. Now, the 408 visa has been around for a while. It's got a number of different categories. but the department announced a pathway so that it was a visa of last resort where people found themselves onshore and unable to either leave the country or didn't have any other visa options. So that was useful. And then in July, we came across the second wave. Around the 7th of July, Victoria went into probably the longest, most severe lockdown that we saw in Australia. Went on for 112 days, and that impacted on the economy significantly, particularly if anyone was working in the service industry. And as you know, a lot of the temporary visa holders do work in the service industry. We're talking about our students, our working holiday makers. Many people are on a temporary visa of some sort. They were caught out. And then we got to the end of October, the lockdown started to end. And then towards the end of the year and more recently, the government's been talking about rolling out the vaccine and how that will impact on immigration and people travelling internationally. And more recently, as yesterday, they've announced the pathway to New Zealand has been opened with certain
So what will
conditions.
that mean? Maybe you do a bit more detail on that Trans-Tasman bubble.
Can do.
Yep.
Yeah. Also, people who are caught on here and maybe subject to what they call Section 48, they've had a visa refused onshore.
Yep.
Sometimes the easiest way of dealing with that is that they should leave the country. Yep. Up until now, they haven't had that option. So what they could now do is potentially just fly to New Zealand and then get their visa affairs in order and then return to Australia.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that, as you mentioned before, with the Trans-Tasman thing, it can change by the day. I mean, we had 2 cases, I think, in Auckland, and they shut the whole city down.
That's correct.
So, but at the moment, you can get on a plane and go to New Zealand without any quarantine.
With some conditions, that's correct.
Yep. Okay.
Provided to be in Australia, yes. Okay, so a lot's happened in the past 12 months. So it's a timely review of where we are on the immigration front. Okay, just going back to those announcements on the 4th of April 2020. So the initial announcement from the government said that temporary visa holders who are on TSS or 457s were able to access some portion of their superannuation. So previously that wasn't available. Visa holders who were stood down but not laid off were able to have their visas extended in some instances. Now, this is the third point, is the one I wanted to highlight for members, is that it was announced that businesses can reduce skilled visa holders' working hours without breaching sponsorship obligations. Now, that was critical during the lockdowns when people were just unable to work, businesses were closed. And so, but this particular concession has not been subsequently reflected in regulations. So if members do come across this issue and they're subject to a monitoring exercise of some sort, they should probably call the Workplace Advice Line and get some assistance on that. Okay. We've seen no further announcements in the sponsorship obligations after this announcement was made. The arrangements are in place with the 457, 482 visa holders, provided that they're not disadvantaged when they make their application for permanent residency. Okay, so the department has introduced a number of measures that will allow them to continue to make their applications for PR.
Even if they don't meet the hourly
Even if they
hours a week.
That's right, yeah. But once again, you have to be very careful about that. You need to check the regulations very carefully to make sure that you comply with the concessions. So that was the 4th of April. And, sorry, just go back to, yes, okay. Now, just quickly covering the work rights. This is a topic that often comes up with members. Now, with so many temporary visa holders onshore, and many of them would have changed their visa a couple of times in the last 12 months, it's important that members continue to check the work rights of everyone, not only the direct employees, but also the subcontractors. If you've got employees who are on your site from a labour hire agency, then you need to check their work rights as well. Very easy to do. The documents that are available, if they've got Australian citizenship certificate, Australian passport, some evidence of permanent resident status. But the preferred way for the department is to use the VIVO system, Visa Entitlement Verification Online. It's available to all employers. And if you have passport, that's the most common document that you can use, passport bio page, jump onto the Vivo system and check that all of your employees have got valid work rights. It's fairly critical.
Okay, I've tried to go onto Vivo, and you find that you need to register for an account.
Most employers will have an account. Certainly we have an account. All my migration agents will have an account.
Yep. But if you're just a business, you can
yes.
go onto the webpage, but you have to go through a registration process and then get approval. Is there anything else you need?
What else would you need?
That's
about it.
Yeah.
Just get approval and then you've got access.
Need to get registration, complete.
Get the passport, any sort of number they give you, and check it through.
Yeah. Quite often, if you haven't got a passport or it's an expired passport, you'll get an error message, and then it's really up to the individual to go to the department and clarify what their work rights are.
Okay.
So, but up until they have done that, the employer shouldn't be employing them.
Yep. So I checked with the Workplace Advice Line just before this, and their advice to everyone is that you should, as part of your onboarding process, check someone's work rights. I mean, it seems a fairly basic thing. A lot of businesses don't do it, but it's very easy to get a Vivo check online. It's better to be safe than sorry later.
100%.
Right.
For sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's work rights. Casting our minds back to April, the other thing that was introduced was the event, COVID-19 event visa, subclass 408. Now, there's two announcements that are relevant here. One was the one in April, and it was announced that you would use this visa where you had to remain in Australia, you had no other visa options available, and you're unable to depart due to the travel restrictions. So it was a visa of last resort, if you like. You also had to meet some other criteria. You had to have employment in a critical sector, agriculture, food processing, healthcare, aged care, disability, childcare, a number of other sectors. Okay, so that was the initial announcement. Some people were able to make applications for different visas, perhaps a visitor visa, but there were a few people that were caught out that had no other visa options, and they were required to apply for a 408, subclass 408. Okay. And then more recently, February 21, they had an additional announcement, and this was more related to people entering and who were here for assisting with a global business or event the Australian government had announced. For staff that were required for these events, they could make an application for 408 as well.
So is this the idea that we want businesses to move to Australia because we're safe?
We are safe. Yeah, that's right. In a global context, for sure. So this was an additional measure that they announced in February. So we don't, from Visa Solutions' point of view, I wouldn't say we do an awful lot of 408s because many people have other visa options as well.
Yeah. Like?
They can quite often, they're skilled workers, they apply for 482s. They can apply, if you're coming in, you'd normally apply for a subclass 400. Yeah, so there's plenty of other options there. Okay. Just going to run through briefly. Most of the audience will be familiar with these visas, so I just wanted to cover them off. The one that is most common amongst the AI group members would be the subclass 482, which is the newer version of the old 457. Very important that members realise that the 482 has explicit sponsorship obligations and compliance requirements, and direct employment requirements, minimum salary requirements, minimum number of hours. There's a range of sponsorship obligations. So all of the members who have sponsored workers need to be focused on those obligations and make sure they comply, particularly over the last 12 months. Okay. The subclass 400, highly specialised temporary work, has to be applied for from offshore. It's for short-term, highly specialised work requirements, which are not ongoing, can be issued for up to 6 months. And we've used that a number of times in the last 12 months, where, for example, an employer has machinery sitting on the wharf, has to be installed, the installation team has to come from offshore, and we've utilised the subclass 400 visa in combination with the travel exemption as well. Probably a group of temporary visa holders who've been impacted severely in the last 12 months has been the working holiday makers and the work and holiday makers. So that's the subclass 417 and the subclass 462. They are typically, they were limited to 6 months work with each employer. There's been some concessions around that. but the same token, employers need to check the work rights for anyone on those sorts of visas. Employers...
Sorry, the cohort of those working holiday makers must be a lot smaller now.
Much
They've
smaller.
gone, I assume they've just been going home.
A lot of them have gone home. We've got a chart later on that I would like to draw everyone's attention to just to show you. And that's impacted on the skills that are available for employers. Because between your international students and your working holiday makers, they provide a large proportion of the unskilled work for employers as well.
So it used to be said there's around about 1 million people in Australia with working rights.
That's correct.
Yeah, and that might be just 3 months, or it might be the 482s.
Yeah, and we'll get to, when we show the chart on departures and arrivals, you'll see how that's been impacted since last year. It's massive.
Can't wait.
Yeah. Subclass 407 is somebody who's coming into the country, needs to be upskilled to Australian standards. So we use the 407 for that, the training visa. And the last one, the subclass 494, employer sponsored. A lot of employers probably have not come across this one. This is in part the replacement of the old subclass 187, which was the regional sponsored migration scheme. Okay.
I might just grab, just to remind people that if you want to ask questions, please put them in the chat box. But there's a couple come in from Inigo about the whether you can enter on a tourist visa from Europe in particular, but anywhere.
Tourist visas generally won't make the requirements unless they have a very special case to get through a travel exemption.
Right. So what's a special case?
We've got a chart coming up about that.
Okay. You have to wait for that.
It's the old economist.
Okay.
We have
and
a
there's
chart.
a couple of other questions here which I'll come to at the end in case he answers them on the way. Okay, back to you, Dan.
All right, no worries. Okay, Tony, this is a chart that I put up just because a lot of members ask us about the visa processing times. Now, you can see by comparison, these are the standard times that the department uses to advise people how long their application will take. 75% of applications represent the blue bar, and 90% of the applications, the grey bar, is when the visa is assessed within. So you can see the 407 is somewhere between 12 and 15 months. Subclass 400.
407, you better say what they are.
Sorry, yeah. So going back to the last one, the 407 is a training visa. Yep. The subclass 400 is the offshore specialised short-term visa,
which is
somewhere
quick.
between 2 and 4 months. That's quick, and that's why a lot of employers use it. It's quick access. I put the two 186s in there. They're permanent visas, but I put that in there just to show that applying for a permanent visa doesn't necessarily mean that it's longer than a temporary visa. And I think that's something that the employers need to know, because some of the employers have asked that question. We look at the 482, the medium term and the short term skill list. You can see that the overall time between the short term list or the medium term list is about the same, but the occupations on the medium term list are processed slightly quicker for the 75% of occupations. And the last one I put in there is the application for the partner visa, which is the subclass 820, because a lot of temporary visa holders will also make an application for a partner visa where they've met someone on shore. But you can see to get the partner visa, you're waiting 2 to 2.5 years, which is a long time. So if you get access to something else, then you might get a quicker outcome.
And do you have to go offshore?
No, those ones you don't have to go offshore. Yeah, so I just wanted to give everyone a bit of a feel for what the visa processing times is. And you can see why the subclass 400 is a popular visa.
Are these official numbers or your numbers?
No, these are official numbers. No, we don't have our own numbers.
Okay. Because they used to say they were, I thought you might have done estimates. They used to say they were much quicker than that. It looks like it's blown out a fair bit.
That's correct, yeah. Okay. Now, this is one of the charts I wanted to share with everyone. This is what's happened since the border was closed. You can see that this is the total arrivals, permanent and temporary visa holders into Australia. We have the number there for February 2020, and you can see it's just under 800,000 arrivals in that month. After the border was announced that it was going to be closed, March it dropped down to just under 365,000.
Almost half.
Okay. And then we get to April, the borders are closed. Australia's closed for business. 5,160 arrivals compared to just under 800,000 2 months earlier. Now, when you see a reduction of that many people coming into Australia, it's no wonder that so many employers are asking, that where are the people? Where can we get, skilled staff from? Because a large proportion of international arrivals just are not there anymore. We just don't have the people. So I think everyone's aware of the border closures, but I think this really highlights the impact that it had. Now, just kicking off the next chart from April 2020, which is the 5,000, you can see in this chart that we are starting to get back to some movement of people. And you can see the arrival of visa holders, temporary and permanent, from April 2020, which was the 5,125, up to, these numbers are up until January 2021. And it's interesting there, you can see from this chart that we were just coming out of the first wave, and then we went into the second wave. And then from July, we saw another dip in the number of arrivals as we came through.
I think what it also shows is that the government is, even though they're under pressure to bring Australians back, they know they need to have a mix on the planes to help business go. So they'll bring Australians back, but they'll also allow temporary visa holders to come in.
Correct.
Not in as big numbers, but certainly they're a mix on the plane.
Correct. And if you have a look at the blue area, you can see that the temporary visa holders have been coming back in increasingly since September of last year. They're representing a larger proportion compared to the permanent visa holders. So Australia is moving in the right direction as we've got the pandemic under control. Now, just breaking down that blue area, you can see the mix. Now, there's two things I'd like to highlight in here. Is you can see the working holiday visa makers that we were talking about before. That's that yellow line that goes across the middle of the chart. It really hasn't changed. So your working holiday makers, your work-end holiday makers are just not available for employers. They're not coming back, and a whole bunch of them would have left because they don't have the support.
That's tourist visa. That's sort of tourist visa.
Well, the
working tourist visa.
Working holiday, yes, working holiday.
So it's not a priority.
Yeah. Then at the
Unless
bottom,
you're on a farm, it's a big priority.
Well, it's a big issue for our farmers in our agricultural sector.
Yep.
That's right. And the bottom line shows you the international students. So the international students also provide a large proportion of the unskilled workforce across Australia, and you can see that they're just not available at the moment. There's been a very small pickup, but there's very limited exemptions for international students entering Australia. Okay. Outside of that, you can see that the larger blue area is the subclass 400, the short-term work visas. So the department's been very responsive to make sure that employers are able to get the skilled people through, and we've seen a growth in that. And the TSS and the old cohort of 457s, but it's really the TSS applications, have gradually been increasing since about September. So that's good for employers. So the growth in the blue band and the growth in the purple band, it's very good for employers. It means they're able to get access to their key staff from offshore. The red part in the middle represents those on visitor visas, but generally those with concessions who can enter. And a lot of that is probably linked to your family members rejoining your 482s. Okay. So we're starting to see the economy open up and people starting to arrive back into Australia. And then this chart here just breaks down the entry of the TSS, or the 482 visa holders. You can see we went through the second wave. It dropped off around July and August. And then since around September, we've seen significant growth right up until January. So we expect that's going to continue now that we have the processes for travel exemptions nailed down with the department, and employers are a lot more familiar with the quarantine arrangements as well, which we'll cover later on. But it is important for all employers to realise that the process now is significantly different to what it was pre-COVID-19. Pre-COVID-19, most employers were concerned about like which visa, what was the appropriate visa, the work rights, and all of that is still relevant. But now we have to look at whether or not somebody qualifies for a travel exemption, and the travel exemption and the visa need to be conducted in tandem. So the department wants to see both of those. And we had AI Group had a very strong win on that because they were allowed to make the application for the travel exemption before we made the application for the TSS, which was good. And we've also got the mandatory hotel quarantine arrangements. If you're an international arrival in Australia, you must budget and allow for 2 weeks mandatory quarantine, which is going to cost quite a bit, and we'll cover that a little bit later on.
Yep. And you can't quarantine on your boat. There's all sorts of exemptions that come up.
You can't live on your boat.
It seems logical, but there's
even
not
if you've got a
necessarily logic
super
in
yacht.
it. Yes.
And the last thing is, Tony, is the current interstate borders seem to be relaxed at the moment, but they can change at a moment's notice. So employers who are bringing people in need to consider about which state they need that person to be in, where they're going to be arriving, and what the current interstate border requirements are going to be.
And we have had a couple of cases. I know we had one in Western Australia where someone was given an exemption from overseas, but they were stopped in Western Australia by the West Australian Police.
That's correct.
We worked our way through that, but these things can happen.
Yeah, that was a great example, wasn't it? They arrived, yes.
yeah, we got them through, but
yeah,
states are their own. We're a federation.
Okay, so this is a chart that we go through these costs a lot with employers who are talking about bringing skilled workers in at the moment. Indicative quarantine costs for a family of 2 adults and 2 children over the age of 3 or 6. In New South Wales, you should budget for a single room, which will cost around $5,000 for quarantining New South Wales. These are the New South Wales government figures. And in Western Australia, they've got a slightly different structure, but the cost for 2 adults and 2 children over the age of 6 will also be around $5,000. That's for a single room. So that needs to be planned for. It needs to be budgeted for. And most employers who do this are now doing this regularly, are very familiar with these. But for those employers, manufacturing, retailing, or other sectors that haven't done a lot of access to the skilled offshore workers, this is a new item for them. Okay.
Cool.
So it's more expensive now.
Okay. Now, we've got quite a few questions coming in, but I think this travel exemption area might answer a couple of those questions that are coming in. So we might go straight to Kenny Lee, and then we'll work our way through the questions, which will certainly take up the hour, I think, by what I'm seeing coming in. So
Exactly.
over to Kenny Lee, who's just got a few slides here on travel exemptions.
All right.
Thank you,
Can you
guys.
just tell me when to press the button?
Sure, go ahead. So who needs an Australian travel exemption? So in here, you're automatically exempt if you're an Australian citizen or permanent resident of Australia. And if you're immediate family members of an Australian citizen or PR. So in here, what defines immediate family? They're your spouse, your children, okay? And next will be the New Zealand citizen who usually live in Australia and their immediate family members. And the person who's been in New Zealand for the last 14 days, so before coming to Australia by air. And a diplomat accredited to Australia, including their family members. And the person transiting Australia for 72 hours or less. Airline crew, maritime crew, and including marine pilots. A person recruited under the government-approved seasonal worker program or Pacific Labour Thing. Or a person who's holding a 1AA business visa. So these are your auto exempt persons who can come into Australia without a travel exemption.
So Kenny, can I just, a person transiting Australia for 72 hours or less, does that mean they've gone through immigration or they haven't gone through immigration? Like they're at the airport?
They're at the airport.
They're at the airport.
Transiting.
They're not coming into Australia.
No. Yeah.
So they've not come through immigration.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So a good example for that one, Tony, is someone who's coming on, for example, on a maritime crew visa.
Right.
They've landed the boat. They then go to the airport and then they fly out.
Right.
They're in Australia for less than 72 hours, and so they will not need an exemption. I might add, though, there is some grey areas around those automatic exemptions, and you should probably seek advice because in some instances we have put in a separate application just to ensure the person does not face any hurdles when they come through.
Yeah, so we had a case with an Australian arriving from Fiji who was told they had to go into quarantine.
Yes.
So they must have gone through immigration.
They
They
Correct,
wanted
yeah.
to keep on going. And
Yeah, but this is the travel exemption, so I'm not sure whether, with that one, the quarantine might have been a different issue. But where somebody is listed and they think they have an automatic travel exemption, they may not, which means if you've
So
got
how do they
travel
check?
exemption- normally, you will receive something from the department. If you make the application, you have a confirmation in writing from the department. If you are travel exempt, I don't think if they do a check, I don't think there is any way of finding out, is there?
From the border.
Yeah, to see whether they're automatically exempt as a...
No, just like for the certain visa type. Yeah, so on this, just want to throw in an example here. So a subclass A20/A01, which is the partner visa, permanent residence, versus someone who's on the tourist visa or on the student visa, whose partner is Australian citizen or PR. Well, the second category of people will need a travel exemption because they're holding a temporary visa versus a permanent resident.
Right.
Yeah.
And these are people coming into Australia. Getting exemptions to leave Australia is a whole different thing.
That's right. And if you want to leave Australia and you're an Australian citizen or permanent resident, then you've got to go through the same travel exemption process.
Same process.
Yeah.
Well, but there are now some questions about New Zealand because you can go to New Zealand and theoretically you could continue
You can
on.
sort of
Correct.
bypass.
So anyway, things are getting complicated. Sorry, Keeney.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
All right. So process requirements?
Yeah. So how to do this? How to apply for this travel exemption? Well, all the applications for travel exemption must be made through the travel exemption portal by the Australian Border Force, and applications are assessed on a case-by-case basis. Okay, and the application must be made at least 2 weeks, but no more than 2 months before the planned travel. And essentially, there are two categories here. So first one is the critical skills and sector category. And that's what commonly used by the employers. And the second one is the compelling and compassionate reason. This is more applicable to, like for your family members, your partners, and etc. Okay, so what to include in the application? Well, first one is the proof of identity, which is i.e. your passport, and the evidence that you hold a valid visa or have applied for a visa. Intention to apply for a visa. Travel itinerary, marriage, birth, death certificate. So these are to evidence the relationship to the Australian citizen or partner, whatever, whichever relationship that you fall under. And the proof of relationship or residence, which is like a joint tenancy agreement or joint bank account. For the joint tenancy agreement or bank account, this is more for the de facto relationship. And the letter from the employer indicating why the travel is necessary. So, for example, traveling to Australia to complete urgent work on the project. Okay. And the supporting letter from the business or government agency advising why your skills are critical. And then finally, this requirement just came out around 2 weeks ago. The statutory declaration to support your claim. So to talk about what's the purpose of your travel coming here. Okay. And again, and this one is used for both inbound and outbound travel. You must talk about, what your purpose of inbound or outbound travel. And so in here, we just want to highlight that, the application is assessed case by case, and the rules keep constantly changing. Yeah. And what we know, I think, for student visa holders now, if you're in year 11 or 12, you can apply for travel exemption. And also those one in the uni final years, in nursing, dental, or medical can also apply for travel exemption to come back, to complete your final year of study.
Are there any standard reasons for rejection, like particular things that people put in as a reason to get exemption but they're rejected? Or is it hard to pick?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the compassionate travel exemption applications are being refused because they want to be with family members, but there's not a strong business case for it.
Right.
It's a stronger argument where someone's critically ill, there's been a death in the family. This is on the compassionate side. If you are applying through the critical skills or critical sector side, you have to demonstrate that you meet the critical skill or that you're working for an employer in a critical sector.
Right.
Yeah.
And we had a case just recently where the primary visa holder was in a critical area, but the spouse is not treated as being in a critical area. So
Correct.
the primary
That's-
visa holder is allowed in,
Yeah.
but the spouse was not. And they were separated for about 5 months, I think, before we could sort it out.
Yeah.
Mm.
But that's just a normal response to that type of thing.
In the current environment, that's a standard response, and we have to be careful, and we have to advise our clients and AI group members that is going to be an issue. So the
That's
critical worker will be able to come through
And
their
that's
skills.
And that's one thing we've been talking to the government about, saying that the critical worker's spouse should be also counted as a critical worker.
Yes.
Mm.
But we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you go
nice.
to the
Next
next
one?
one? This is
Yeah.
the critical skills and sector, probably the most relevant for AI group members.
Yeah. Okay. So, what is a critical skill / sector? So providing critical or specialist medical services, including air ambulance, medical evacuations, and delivering critical medical supplies. And critical skills required to maintain the supply of essential goods and services, such as in medical technology, critical infrastructure, telecommunications, engineering and mining, supply chain logistics, aged care, agriculture, primary industry, food production, and maritime industry. Delivering services in sectors critical to Australia's economic recovery, such as financial technology, large-scale manufacturing, film, media, and television production, and emerging technology that no Australian worker is available. And providing critical skills in religious or theology fields, and sponsored by your employer to work in Australia in an occupation on the Priority Migration Skilled Occupation List, PMSOL. And finally, when in Australia's national interest, supported by the Australian government or the state government authority.
That's a pretty broad list there. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of room to move within that, isn't there?
There is and there isn't. It depends on the situation.
Mm.
Yeah. If so when we are dealing with a member and they need to get somebody in, we're always trying to see where they fit within those categories. I think anything. I mean, I think part of the reason that Australia's been successful and the economy rebounding so quickly is because anyone who's in a job, the PM said a year ago, is a critical worker. So it's been interpreted fairly broadly up until now.
Okay.
Mm.
So now time for questions, and thanks for that, Keeney.
Yeah.
And we've got quite a few in, so we'll try and work our way through these. And apologies if I don't get to your
Okay.
question.
Mhm.
We had one more case study. Did you want to?
One more case study. Sorry.
This is just
Yeah.
the
I've
last
jumped.
one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Can you just want to cover this? This
Yeah,
is
sure.
an actual
So,
case that we completed for a client.
Yeah,
Okay.
so an actual case we completed for the client. This is in the food production business or manufacturing industry. So we applied for Subclass 400, which is a highly specialized short-term work visa, plus the travel exemption application. The visa applicant occupation's mechanical engineer and is coming from Italy. So so the project and the applicant information was provided on the 14th. Took us about a week to prepare and lodge application. Submitted on the 21st. Got a 1-day turnaround, and got the visa and the travel exemption grant on the same day. So
So it's not all bad news.
not all bad news. No. Well, in this particular case, this occupation is in the critical skill. Okay, so it's well noted that in the priority migration skill occupation list, the mechanical engineer is on the list, and the critical. The industry is in the critical sector too, so that's why we got a quick turnaround. But please be noted that this is not every case that gets the same processing time, even if you're in both the critical role and the critical sectors. Just depends on the nature of the projects and the critical deadlines.
Okay, I guess the moral of this case study is be very careful in what category you're putting the person in the application, because something to you might look like a manager is actually a CEO of something critical, or you might put down a particular sector that you might be multiple sectors, and you pick one that's not critical, and you'll just get no. And it's very hard to turn no around, isn't it?
Yeah, if you get no, then you need a fresh application. And also the department doesn't tell you why you got to no.
Yeah.
So
actually, and also just on that as well, the travel exemption is free of charge in terms of application fee. Just want to add on that. So you can try.
Yeah, and that's what, as Dan mentioned before, we managed to get that turned around. Before, you used to have to apply for the visa and then the exemption in some cases. Now you can get the exemption, so you know whether or not you'll be able to get that person in if they do get the visa. So
yeah, that was a big win early in the piece. Otherwise, some members were getting caught with having to pay the Skilling Australia Fund levy.
Yep.
Before they know they had a travel exemption.
Yep. Which is actually, I'll go straight into it now. If you're done, I can
thanks.
We're done.
Thanks.
Okay. I'll go straight into that because one of the questions was what sort of costs involved. So maybe as a case study, it's a 482 and a critical skill. What sort of costs involved in getting them in?
Okay. So if we are talking about this one here, the application fee for a subclass 400, if we just talk about the government fees, application fee, Kenny, for a subclass 400?
It's around 300.
About 300, say. Travel exemption, there is no government application fee. Quarantine cost for this person would be about $3,000. You've got to allow for the airfare. Most airfares coming international now are still business class. So we're talking about, let's say, $5,000 for the airfare.
Up to 10, I guess.
Up to 10, that's right. And then our fee for doing a subclass 400 is around about $1,200. So you can see that the fees for getting it done are fairly low in comparison to having the person arrive and then working at the site.
Okay.
Yeah, that's for a subclass 400. It's obviously different for a subclass 482 because it's a longer-term visa. The application fees are higher, and you've got the Skilling Australia Fund levies as well.
Okay.
But the travel exemption fees are the same, and the cost of quarantining are also the same.
Okay, I'll try and get through as many of these as we can in the last 15 minutes. There's about 20 questions here. So here's one, and there won't be any particular order. Here's one that we're looking for. This is from Lucy. We're recruiting for a permanent full-time role at a remote location, and the preferred candidate has a student visa. What sort of options do we have?
Okay. Depending on the student visa that they hold, they may be able to apply for a 485. We would have to look at the skills and qualifications of the person and see whether or not, if they've had a skills assessment, what experience they've got. As a general rule, somebody wants to work in Australia in a skilled occupation, they need a qualification and they need experience. If they haven't got one of either of those, then we have to make adjustments and decide on the visa. If they're a student visa or they're a working holiday maker and they have got the appropriate visa and exemptions in place, they can generally do unskilled work.
But isn't there's some hourly limits, isn't there?
There is.
So if you're a
student
permanent
visa,
full-time, you're not going to be able to have a student day.
unless your course is no longer in session. That's right.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
So
Or you've finished your visa. You can work after you've finished your
After you've
studies.
finished your studies.
2 years?
Yeah, on a subclass 485, if you qualify for the subclass 485.
Okay, all these things you need to check. And
It
as we
gets-
mentioned earlier, the Vivo is where
Vivo
you'll find that
check
out.
is important. Yeah.
I think
We'll say-
employers, if they have these questions, call the workplace advice line in the
Yep.
first instance.
AI Group's workplace
And
advice
then
line.
after they get some initial advice, they can come through to our team as well.
To us. Okay. Okay, here's a question from Kathy. If you want to sponsor an individual who's currently residing overseas on a skilled visa, can they enter the country? Well, that goes down to the exemptions. It's
Yeah, they got to
yeah.
apply for the
that's correct.
travel
Yeah,
exemption.
they'd have to meet those.
So the answer is yes, if you have a travel exemption.
And there's all sorts of criteria, as you can see from the previous slide.
Mm.
Okay, we can cover it. This is a good question. We touched a little bit on it, the student visas.
Mm.
Can Dan speak a little bit about how student visas work? That's from Alan.
Okay, Alan, student visas were about 18 months, 2 years ago. They were sort of recrafted in terms of the framework, and it depends on the passport that you hold and the course that you're completing at the institution. So that provides a matrix, if you like. If you've got, in the last 12 months, we're really talking about students who are remaining on shore, and the issue for the employers has been whether or not they've got the correct visa and they're allowed to work. And this is outside of the Deliveroos and all that subcontracting issues where they're dropping meals off. This is where perhaps you've got them working in your factory. You need to make sure that the student visa holder has got correct work rights, and if their course has come to an end, they've applied for something else. So, Alan, what would normally happen is that they would finish their course, most of them would apply for a subclass 485. That gives them 2 years of work experience in Australia, and after that, they should have access to permanent residency. That's the normal procedure for somebody completing student visa in Australia.
Okay. So here's a question from Ethel. We're a business based in regional New South Wales. We've been approached by a worker on a 482 visa working for a business in Melbourne.
Mm.
He would like to move to a regional area. Presumably it helps with a permanent residency application as well.
That's correct. Yeah, that's
Are
right.
there any issues? Because he or she's lost their employer in Melbourne
Yes.
for another job. There's no problems?
There is. If you're on a 482, one of the requirements in the obligations that it's on your visa, you can only work for your sponsoring employer. So if you work for another employer, then you're in breach of your visa. And similarly for the employer, they can only employ people that have the ability to work for them. So what's got to happen is if that particular employer wants that person, go through the normal interview recruitment process, select that person, and then you do an application for a nomination transfer to that business. Once that nomination is approved, then that person can then legally work for the new sponsor.
So you
entity.
need to become the new sponsor of that 482 from a
Correct.
different employer.
If
Is
you-
that something that gets approved most of the time?
Yes. Yeah. If it's a skilled worker
Yep.
in the current environment, if you're in regional Australia, there shouldn't be an issue. But certainly don't employ them, or don't put them on the job or start paying them until their new nomination is approved.
Sorry, Ethel has part two. I missed that.
Part two.
Yeah, we are a business sponsor, but I don't know whether we can hire him straight away or whether we need to wait till we get approval from immigration. Yes, you do.
You
As
do.
Dan
Yeah.
answered, his migration agent said we can. But the website seems to contradict that,
Yes.
as Dan has just confirmed.
Mm.
We've not continued. We do not want to inadvertently contravene any laws. If you follow what Dan said, you should be all right.
Yeah.
But again, any further questions, talk to Workplace Advice Line.
Mm.
If a person, this is from Carol, if a person has a subclass 500 and their partner is studying master's degree, can they work more than 40 hours a fortnight providing they produce partner evidence?
Mm.
There you go.
That I would have to check that. Kenny, do you know
Yeah.
off the top of your head whether a master's student partner has got full work rights? I know with a PhD doctorate they usually do.
Partner normally is fine. Yeah.
So
it's
500
the main,
is the student one.
500 student visa,
Yeah.
they're studying a master's level.
Yep.
They probably do, but we'd take that on notice. We'd have to check that just to check the regs.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a partner. The fact they're studying masters, they're probably not on a 500. They'd be at a company visa.
Oh, 500 is for all degrees. They've changed the subclass to
Yeah,
500
but this is
student
about
visa.
this is about the partner
Yeah.
studying. So
That'll be partner 500
rules.
dependent.
right,
Mm.
okay.
Yeah.
Which they
yeah,
can.
under the same subclass. Yeah.
So
yeah.
so no limit.
Yeah, not yeah.
We'd probably need to check
They
that.
need to check
Yeah,
that.
we don't-
So look, we'll get back to you on that one.
yeah, we don't do a lot of
Apologies for that.
student visas.
And we'll send a
Yeah.
note out on that particular one. Sorry for any
Mm.
confusion
Sure. Yeah.
when we send out the video afterwards.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, now we're getting into some details here.
Yeah.
Here's one from Dylan. What's the cost for Queensland hotel quarantine? You only mentioned
Queensland.
Western Australia.
Well, we only mentioned Western Australia.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think all the National Cabinet, the premiers, I think they've all gravitated towards a very similar system.
About 3,000.
It's about 3,000 for an individual. It's about 5,000 for a family. One room for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's a question from Anne-Marie. I have some labour hire workers on a 500 visa, the student visa.
Yes.
We have been told they are now only permitted to work 20 hours a week.
Mm.
They have applied for a bridging visa and have critical skills. What are the options? That's a good one.
Okay.
Ooh. Okay. Critical skills
Yeah.
is good. If they're on student visas, that is a bit of a clash because a lot of people in critical skills don't usually have student visas, unless we're talking about, for example, the
I'm
shop
thinking
stackers at Coles and some
Or a
of the
social
Woolworths.
worker.
Social workers.
Mm.
Maybe some more details, Anne-Marie.
We'd need
On
some
that
more
one.
details. We'll go through it. But yeah, I would definitely check that. And the rules are very fluid around that as well.
Okay. And Paul asks, are adult children of our permanent resident visa covered? Not quite sure. You might need to, not quite sure what that question is, Paul.
That depends on whether they're considered dependents
Okay.
under the visa rules.
Okay.
So if they've been in full-time employment, even up until their mid-20s, they can demonstrate that they're fully financially dependent and they've been in full-time study. They can be, but it would depend. Yeah, if they've had a break, then it could be an issue.
Oh, Jessica's making a comment here. Employees working in healthcare industry on student visa before the COVID pandemic were allowed to work more than 40 hours per fortnight. When will working rights go back to normal? 40 hours per fortnight. When will working rights go back to the normal? What was the normal? 40 hours?
40 hours a fortnight.
Yeah. So
20 hours a week.
Yeah, currently there's concession, and it's only applicable to certain sectors. So we, at this point in time, we haven't heard when this will go back or this concession will cancel. But we would assume that if things gets better, and then this is when the government will revisit this requirement.
Okay. And follow up from Jessica is who would you recommend contacting if we have questions about employees' new visa working conditions? So I think, again, call the AI group. If you're an AI group member, which you should be, call the workplace advice line. They either help or they'll refer you to Dan.
Correct.
Dan Lakini. Okay. Now we're back to appeals now, which is we were talking before about refusals.
Yes.
We've only got 7 minutes to go. We are about to lodge our second appeal to the department for our candidate to enter Australia on the approved 482 visa. So that'll be for an exemption. What is the approval rate for appeals of this nature at the moment? For Frida.
Approval rate. When they say appeal, they don't actually mean an appeal. That means that they're putting in another travel exemption.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Yeah, we're talking about the travel exemption, not the visa.
Yes, that they've got an approved 482 visa.
Yes.
In which case they should be, rather than appealing, if they're appealing, they should be applying for another exemption.
It would be another exemption, So I would look, if they've already had a refusal and you've got someone in a 482, 482 says they're already a skilled person. So the question is whether or not they're a critical skill or they're in a critical sector. So I think if we have a look back to the notes that we provided earlier, employers would just have to sort of pull that apart and to see, okay, for the occupation, the sector that they're operating. The point you made earlier on was very good. A number of AI members operate in a number of different sectors. So choose the sector which is clearly within the critical sectors, and then you are much more likely to get a positive response from the department.
Yeah, but I know you've told me before about cases where they've had 7 different applications for the same person.
We have lodged,
approved.
There was one travel exemption where we lodged it 7 times. On the 7th time, it got approved.
Yeah, which there's no rhyme or reason to that. For some reason, the 7th reason works.
It's
not bad news there. You might be lucky, but if you get into any troubles, please call the workplace advice line.
Yes.
If you're transiting, and this is from Judy, if you're transiting and staying overnight, would you need a travel exemption? I guess if you're staying overnight,
if you stay overnight, I would you will come out from the airport, then you'll need a visa.
You'll need a visa.
You might be within that 72 hours if you're just transiting through.
If it's just transiting.
But if you've got into Australia.
If you're arriving in Australia, you pass the border, you're going to need that.
If you're in Australia, you're in quarantine, 100%.
Can you go, if you're transiting for a day, can you go into the hotel quarantine just for a day and then leave? Or do you have to go 2 weeks?
I think that's possible. I don't think you need to do the full, because you're going into quarantine and then you're leaving.
Okay.
That's right,
Yep. Now, Dylan also asked the jobs that fall into the critical skills sector, and there was we had a slide on that earlier. Do you want to put that up?
We do. Did you want to go through the priority migration skilled occupation? Now, this is not exhaustive.
A couple of minutes.
Do you want to, Keeney, do you just want to highlight a couple that we talked about earlier?
Sure. So the list so we have CEO, we have construction project manager, mechanical engineer, GP, and nurse, and two in IT, developer, programmer, and software engineer, and a social worker and nurse.
Oh, no, there's not.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a quick one. Here's a good question from Celia. Do you have any practical tips for dealing with a situation where an employee, according to their Vivo check, is on a bridging visa?
Yeah.
So bridging visas are complicated because there's 5 different types of bridging visas, and so you need to know which bridging visa you're talking about. Without going through all 5 visas, the most common ones onshore that you'll come across will be a bridging visa A or a bridging visa C. If they're on a bridging visa E, then you've got serious issues. Okay, if you're on a bridging visa C, you probably don't have work rights. If you're on a bridging visa A, you may have work rights.
But the Vivo will say no work rights.
Yes.
It'll be pretty clear.
You'll need to clarify it. And the person will have to demonstrate that they do have the work rights. So it's incumbent on the individual to prove to the employer that they have work rights.
Yeah. Okay. And just add on that too, on bridging visa, we just like to friendly remind the members that if they visa holders on bridging visas, please check the check Vivo every 3 months.
It's a very good point.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yes, because
okay.
just make sure. Yeah, because
bridging visas expire.
yeah,
Someone who was on a bridging visa A with work rights is
Mm,
possibly now on a bridging visa C without work rights.
Yeah.
And what I didn't mention earlier was that the fines can be up to $90,000+ for an employer for employing people who don't have work rights.
It's significant.
It's
yes.
very significant. And
Yeah.
the Fair Work Ombudsman is doing a lot of work. They've been funded heavily to investigate workplaces.
Mm.
Okay, so here's one almost out of time. We've got a staff member on a subclass 500 student visa.
Yes.
He is partner dependent as his wife is on a subclass 500 studying as well.
Yes.
So we want to sponsor him or assist him to remain. Which visa would be best to look at?
Well, that's a tough one. We would have
Depends
to
on
look
the
at
we have to
individual
look at the skills and
skills,
CV.
experience.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get,
Communication.
with some of these questions here, I'll get
Yeah.
Dan to maybe email the people
Yeah, if we
concerned.
have the situation in front of us, we can
Yep.
look at it.
Yep.
But you're getting very good with these subclasses, Tony. By the way,
Yeah,
throwing up
subclass
I'll
500, so
forget by
excellent.
next week. So who is responsible from Sam? Who is responsible for quarantine costs? The employer or the visa holder?
That's a very good question. It's not clear in the guidelines. That we saw on the website. Going through WA and going through the New South Wales, it's actually not clear. The individual primarily, but then for most of our clients, the cost is obviously paid by the employer.
Yep.
But if you're an individual going through, as I understand it, reading the websites from the various state governments, it's the individual that is liable.
And Sam also asked, you mentioned business class airfares is a requirement re-airfare class to bring in visa holders. That was just about most of the seats very hard to get and could end
I
up
think
having
that's
to
correct.
pay for
Availability
it.
of the
business
Yeah,
class.
I think the only seats with the social distancing and all the quarantine requirements is there's only business class seats available.
Okay, and this is another question that comes up a lot from Judy. Upon entry of an international, we already have a self-contained place for them to stay. Are they still required to go to a government-selected accommodation for 2 weeks?
Yes.
I think I know the answer there.
The answer is yes.
This is a leading question, I think. How do you go about identifying a suitable immigration agent to assist with processing sponsorship scenarios? Any advice on costing estimates, etc.? Well, Dan will say, talk to Dan.
Cool.
But you
Workplace
also
advice
should-
line.
Workplace advice line, but also registered migration agents. Is there
Yeah,
some
okay,
tips there
yeah.
if they want to try
Yeah,
elsewhere?
that's right. We're all licensed migration agents with the Office of Migration Agents Regulation Authority, which is a part of the Department of Home Affairs. So if you're looking for a licensed migration agent, make sure that they're properly and licensed and qualified.
Okay. And look, we've got on the screen now, or hopefully we'll have, Graham puts it up on the screen now, some contact details there if you want to follow up. We'll try and follow up with some of those questions that you've put as well. You've got Dan's email address up there in Visa Solutions, and you can get Keeney through there as well. Now, we've been coming to an end because we're up to the hour, and there's still quite a few questions I didn't get to, but we'll see what we can do with that later. Any further questions, you can also email onlineevents@aigroup.com.au. As I mentioned before, there will be a video presentation of today's presentation available within the next 2 to 3 days. And thanks again to Dan and Keeney. And that's all for now. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.